All right, so we're talking about a few seconds. I just want to get one of the books that have the
But
order
at the
right.
bottom here, at the top of the next page, there's like some questions.
I'm good, thanks. Mic is on? I don't think, yeah, mine? Okay, you snuck it on.
Lights are on for testing, but we're not live quite yet.
Not live yet? Good.
This is meant to be about an hour, we're running a little bit behind, but when we have about 10 minutes left, you're going to see me seated, and I'm going to do this. That means
Yeah, we'll listen this time.
Then 5, I'll give a couple of cues. But, I don't want to cut a good conversation, but I know PC, you have a hard stop at 7, so we're going to try to respect that. And you just give us the cue to know when it's official.
Heavenly Father, God, look over us, Lord, guide our minds and our tongues, that we may not be offensive. And yet, Lord, lead this meeting here with understanding, unity.
All right, and when you're ready, I'm gonna give you
Okay.
a thumbs up.
You want me to start it?
Yeah.
I'll start it quick. I'm going to thank Pace for hosting us, and then I'm just going to say, hey, let's go around and introduce ourselves, and then we'll talk. So I'll start with you.
Okay.
You can say whatever you want, and we'll go this way. Okay?
No problem.
Stand by.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Police Commissioner Dermot Shea here. We're at Pace, and before I forget, let me thank Pace for allowing us to come into their home tonight to have this real talk. And I'd just like to go around the room here and introduce who's here, and then we'll get right down to it. So I'll start on my right.
I'm Christian Matthew. I am one of the head youth for Guns Down Life Up, which is a prevention program that keeps young youth off the streets and gives them opportunities for better ways of doing what they want to do and have fun at the same time and learn.
Hi, I'm Chief Jeff Madry. I'm the Chief of Community Affairs for the NYPD.
Hi, my name is Jeremiah. I'm one of the founders of Crew Count, and we're a nonprofit that spreads awareness on voter registration and other social justice problems.
Excellent.
My name is Kenny Carter. I'm the founder and president of FAITH, which is Fathers Alive in the Hood, a nonprofit organization that's pretty much service New York area, no borders. And we do what we can in regards to uplifting our community and addressing the issue of fatherlessness throughout the community as well.
And Kenny, you're from Queens, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes, sir.
right? So we got something in common right there. Jeremiah, how about you?
I'm from Brooklyn.
From Brooklyn?
Oh yes, we're at Lincoln Hospital in the Bronx.
Lincoln Hospital in the Bronx. And I was just speaking to one of your friends, I think, about the program. And I think we'll get into that as we go a little further. But this is unscripted, so the floor is really yours. You got the Chief of Community Affairs, Jeff Madry here. You got the Police Commissioner here. And we certainly have a lot to talk about with everything going on in New York City. So I'm going to start just throwing something out. There's a lot of talk about working with the police. Do people trust the police? There's a lot of issues going on in New York City, Kenny, right? A lot of violence that we see. The big topics to me are how do we do better? What are we missing? Whether it's you look at all of New York City or really just as a police department. What is it? Anyone jump in?
I say a time to heal. When we talk about the issues that do exist, there's so many things right now that are preventing the healing. And when you have issue after issue that constantly occur, and there's a healing process that's happening, and you say you got a scab, and then along comes a spider, and then that scab gets ripped off. Now there's a wound again. So now they got to go right back into that process of healing. So is this not, in regards to NYPD, but we have issues within our own community that are consistently occurring. And it's like, it's hard to heal from these particular situations. And it's like, every time we look at, the news or the newspaper, social media, things like that, you see, homicide after homicide. People killing people for what purpose? There's no definition of it, but the only thing that I could channel into is mental health. Because there has to be something wrong with somebody's mind. Because we constantly say, oh, gun violence, but who's holding a gun? So if we understand who's holding a gun, where their mind is at, and what are they suffering from, And we have to have some type of cure for that. We have to have some way to address that. We have to have some type of professionalism that can be able to address these things right where they're at. And everything doesn't require a force. Everything doesn't require brutality behind it. I'm talking about aggressive force, not just brutality, but aggressive force.
You talking about the police or something different?
No, both.
Yeah.
Both. I'm talking about police, right? And I'm talking about my young brothers that's in the street that might can't fight. And so they'll go run and go get a gun and take care of their beef instead of just, shoot the fire. Just like, people used to do that back in the days. You got a problem, we're gonna go square it up and we're gonna fight, and then we're gonna live to see another day. And then if you beat me, I'm gonna see you 2-3 weeks from now after I get my training up, and we're gonna fight again. That's just that, but that doesn't exist no more. Then when we talk about the police, it's a different situation. When you have individuals from other communities, they come in to police our communities, and they have not encountered the mental health issues that exist or the trauma that exists in our particular communities. Like just for instance, when you go to a majority, and it's not just Queens, but it's Brooklyn, it's Manhattan, it's the Bronx, you have these vigils that happen where we, light the candles and balloons and things like that. This is a mourning process. If you go through the community and you just ride through and you see how many candles are being lit, it's like, it's unbelievable. How many people are still traumatized just from losing a loved one a week ago, 2 days ago, and it's still trickling on?
If I could go to you or you know anyone that's been shot in the Bronx?
No,
or
I
in
don't.
Brooklyn?
I don't know anyone, but I know my friends have family members or friends that have been shot either within their community, and I agree with Kenny here that there are a lot of things within our community that have to be fixed, and there's healing process that has to be done. But the way that people view the police is not. My police officers, I actually like my police officers. They're very nice, and they're very hands-on with their community. Even the chief here, I see him at a lot of events all the time. So my friends, they don't see that, but I see that. And because there's already problems within our community, when the police do come, it's like the police are just here to dictate or try to, do things that's going to affect us even more than it already is.
And there's no relationship.
Yes, and it messes up the relationship even more because they don't realize that the police are actually there to be an assistant. They just see them there to dictate and relegate what's going on within their community. So I think that there's a lot of healing that has to take place, and people should start seeing the better side of police and not just see the negative.
You have any thoughts on that?
I agree with what is being said, but I also disagree a little bit because I do feel like we have to take accountability as a community and unite and come together to get things moving. But I also think that there's an internal infrastructure of the NYPD that needs to be shifted a little bit. Because now, when we talk about trauma and healing and things like that, how much vigils do we go to of people lighting candles and there's 100 police there, 200 police there? How can one mourn in peace if the police is there dictating how you're supposed to mourn or what's okay when you're mourning or what's not okay?
I know Jeff wants to jump in, but something interesting you just said.
So to me, I think we do shift what's going on in the community, but there's things internally within the NYPD that also needs to be shifted.
When you say that, what I think there, Jeremiah, is, depending on where we are, it could be a good thing that the police are there, or it's a bad thing. But you're viewing it at sometimes you need space, and you think it's a bad thing that the police are there. And I would ask you just to flush that out. Why? Why do you think?
Because I don't remember your name.
Christian,
as Christian said, there's no relationship. So you can't basically intrude on somewhere, not saying where you don't belong or where you're not wanted.
If it was cops you knew, you think it would be better?
Or not cops you know, but cops that you actually had a real relationship with, that servitude, that actually helps the community, that gets the community input on things. Like when you're talking hand in hand, it has to be hand in hand. They can't just say, we're here, and then when the police come, like he said, there's a dictatorship, or we don't have the will to say, okay, you're in our space intruding right now. Can you leave respectfully without it being you know, like he said, aggressive force on those ends, because, you know, sometimes you might tell an officer like, yo, we're mourning right now, we're dealing with things, and they might not take it the way as what you're trying to say, because there's no relationship there, but that's an end.
I know you got a lot to say.
Absolutely, but just, you know, all three of these gentlemen bring really valid points to this conversation. And, you know, start with Kenny, you know, Kenny talking about the mental illness and the trauma, the untreated trauma that exists in a lot of communities. And a lot of times when police officers are responding to situations, they're coming up against people who've got a lot of untreated trauma. And sometimes it comes out in a form of what might be aggression, but it's not really directed towards the officers. They just need help. They need help. So, and I understand that as police officers, we have to recognize that and say, you know what, a lot may be going on with this person right here, and let me show patience and show empathy and show compassion. That's really what it's up to us as the professionals to try and do a little bit better every time. I understand there are a lot of people out there, especially in underserved, underprivileged communities, who don't have an opportunity to have that trauma properly addressed. So we have to understand that and come respectfully and work to, you know, gain that trust and show patience and empathy. And, you know, when you talk about a vigil and stuff, it just took me back to 2 years ago where we had a vigil out in one of the communities I was in charge of in Brooklyn North. And it was a very tense situation. Someone had got killed out there, someone who was highly respected, but we were also very fearful that retaliation was going to come. So you got to think about it from our perspective. We're worried about a vigil where we think there's going to be retaliation, but I'm also aware that, you know, this is a custom in a community, a custom in a Black community, where you come out and you mourn your brother, your sister, and you light candles and you stand there and celebrate. Believe me, it was a difficult time when I was out there in charge and trying to address that vigil. I took a lot of heat. I took heat from the community. I took heat from my bosses. But I did the best I could out there, kind of breaking and bending the rules a little bit to let people mourn, but to also make sure we keep things safe. So, you know, for policing, it's a very difficult balance. But it starts with understanding you, and then trying to make sure y'all understand a little about what we want to do, make sure things are safe.
I knew there was a reason why I promoted him. See, he makes sense. But he talked about something that to me is very basic. And it's, you know, every situation, there's always two sides. And I think that sometimes what's happening right now is, you know, we're in the middle of it. Sometimes when you're in the middle of a fight or in the middle of, you know, a lot of noise going on, and you don't step back, you only see what's right in front of you. And you don't hear, you know. Yeah, the police are going to that vigil. I know they're making us do whatever. But we've had shootings recently in Queens. I don't know.
The beginning of the year,
where people were shot.
That's one of the
that's
areas
right.
where you see like heavy police presence.
Yeah.
That's right in the area, and right on one side of the block, that's where the individual may have got murdered at. That's where the candles is at. That's where the family members.
Yeah.
They come. They just take their moment of silence, and there's times where I seen like, you know, Sister Erica Ford.
She went out there and she really made a real big deal. Like, what's going on with all of the police? Why is there so many police here to deal with this particular issue in regards to just having a vigil and just showing, you know, just the respect for, you know, the community and what's going on in regards to how they mourn, because every community mourns different.
That's right.
And this is a time right now where, you know, we're seeing so much death. Unfortunately, if it's not from, you know, our people killing our people, it's COVID killing our people. Whichever way it goes. And it's so sad, but there's so much trauma that is not addressed. And it's the reason why it's not addressed, because even the people that's addressing the trauma is traumatized. You have officers that out here right now that are going through situations mentally because they had to encounter situations in their work duty that they still probably go to sleep and they got to wake up with that same kind of, you know, stuff on their minds and their hearts. So you can imagine for somebody that's not an officer that just was like a 7-year-old, 8-year-old child that was on a block around that time. Don't know what he was going around the block. Was a few of them, and when it happened, they are hurt. They're scorned. So now when they're growing up, this is a memory that they will never forget. They
Yeah.
seen a friend of theirs. He might have just been like, yo, here, let me just take you to the store and buy something. You know, just little small gestures, but these are things that gave that young man a relationship with these young people. So now when these young people witness this man get murdered by another man, it's like, wow. There's different things that's happening, and I believe personally that there's a lot of lost souls. And when we talk about souls, it's just your mind, it's your emotions, and it's your will. Those three things right there, once we can identify what a soul is, we can be able to identify what's being stolen. How can a person's mind be stolen? And that's through repetition. If we constantly see the violence that's happening in our community, we're going to start believing, I can't go outside because my community is full of violence. If I constantly see certain things that's being projected, then guess what? Whatever's projected is expected, am I right? If we constantly showing things on a repetition basis. So right now we got a lot of people doing what we doing. We masked up, we having a conversation, which is kind of weird, but it's something, this is the norm. So now we have to adopt these new norms and at the same time deal with the trauma and everything else that's on top of that.
Yeah. You mentioned before the trauma and the scab, you said, I think, right? And not giving the scab time to heal. And thank you for recognizing, I think that's across the board. It's people that live in communities, it's certainly people that wear uniforms too. And you know, when you talk about what people see and what people experience, and then giving people time to decompress from things. And sometimes right now there really isn't time to decompress, and I think you're right. What else, when you think of police, what precinct do you live in Brooklyn, do you know?
I didn't lived in most of the precincts, like I didn't been all over.
Yeah, well,
Brooklyn,
just
so.
pick one, and do you have, you know, would you say you have a relationship with any officers in that area?
No.
Or no?
I have relationships with certain officers, but
Yeah.
that's through them building it, and that's just certain officers. To me, like what the brother here was saying, when we talk about trauma and things like that, it also comes and plays a part within the NYPD to me, because when things go on in the community, there's something like, if there's a shooting going on in my community, there's a 96-hour response. And to me, that's kind of funny and weird, because the police is out there 5 to 6 days and nothing is getting solved. So now the people in the community, they waking up, they gotta come outside every day on the block, get harassed by these same police that's out here supposed to be for the shooting response. But these are the same people being affected by the gun violence. So where's the time for them to heal if they just went through a family member or losing a family member? Then they got the police outside on their block for a week, and then they know that nothing's not getting solved. So to them, it's like
a cycle.
It's like a cycle.
How do you break
and then
the cycle?
Also, like throwing it in their face. I think we give that same response to the community. We let the community respond. You see how Officer Majory said that the police knew when he was at that vigil that there could have been retaliation and he had to bend the rules? I feel like if there was a relationship between the community and those captains, and a real relationship where there's real resources and violence interrupters are put into play to actually stop these things, then you know, y'all don't have to be out there the whole time while the vigil is going on. Or if y'all know something is going on, y'all can say, hey, Bevo, I know you just had 100 days in Brownsville without no shootings. Can you see if I could put you here and see if you can stop what's going on? Because they got a real relationship with the community. They come from the community. We got officers that we don't know, that a lot of people didn't grow up with, just want to come, dictate, like, and then also try to tell us how to mourn, and then y'all supposed to solve things, but y'all harassing us, and all of that like plays a part with what's going on in the community. Like that pushback from the community is not because they don't want to deal with the police or they're scared or after police or however we look at it. Is, you know, we understand there's an internal problem within the NYPD that has to be solved. And that's saying like there's codes and structures and responses and tactics put into play that's outdated and disproportionately targets communities of color. And you know, people realize that now. We know this, like these tactics is outdated, they're not working.
Can you give me some examples?
Like, that's one what I just said right there, like the 96-hour shooting response. We know that's, like, we see the police stand up on blocks for 5 to 6 days and nobody gets arrested, and then they just leave, and then
Then
they
they
come
move
back
on.
when it's another shooting, and it's just the same thing. Y'all just there to, just for presence at that point. You're not there to solve anything or to stop it.
Could you imagine, like,
You know, an officer who had to respond to the shooting response, right? And let's say, in his mind already, like, they savages. They killing each other.
Most
They
definitely.
savages, right? So now, you know, they see you in the community regular, and they gotta call, and they see somebody that might look like you, dress like you, but guess what? In their mind, they're thinking about the last situation they had. So if we savages amongst each other, I got a family I gotta go back home to,
Yeah.
right? So what do you think the response is gonna be towards individuals that are in our community? If we're policing the community and we're dealing with individuals who are acting savagely towards one another, right? And now we dealing with individuals who just regular, like yourself and I, and everybody just, and you have to, you're in the wrong place, wrong time. I don't know when there's a wrong place or a wrong time when you're in your own community, but wrong place, wrong time.
I agree, but now let's look at it like a community. We look at it and we say, look at how the NYPD acts amongst each other. And now look at how they act amongst the people they're supposed to be serving. You get what I'm saying? Why not? Let's actually, if we're gonna talk about building trust and relationships, why not? Let's show BVO. We have violence interrupters, and then numbers are showing that, okay, they have a relationship with the community. They can actually stop things and prevent things before they even happen. So now we're not even talking about having to solve a shooting or even have a 96-hour response. We're talking about preventing it before it even happens.
starts, right.
So I get what you're saying about how they look at us, but now we also see what happens to officers that stand out against what's going on in the NYPD, or what happens to people that try to make it. We see what's going on too. So
Let's
I think
park there for a minute.
that goes both ways.
So in these particular areas where, you know, we watch, you know, good officers that'll stand up and they say certain, you know, and they're whistleblowers. They're ostracized. And you know, some of them, I don't know how the union, how much influence does the union have in regards to NYPD, but I'm sure it's a lot of, you know, power and strings. How do you, being, you know, in the position that you're in, how do you mediate or interfere in certain powers that might supersede yours?
Well, I'm just taking this all in, and I have a lot of thoughts on a lot of, to me, I'll come back to that point. The perception to me is very interesting, how you view the 96-hour plan versus, I was in charge of a precinct, Jeff was in charge of a couple precincts, and how we view that situation is very different. I'll let you talk about it. But like when a shooting would happen in an area, what goes through my mind is definitely not what, you know, you reference, like how you would reference a community. It's more about, all right, here's what happened, here's what we know happened. We go off of intelligence that we think. A lot of times we don't know, but a lot of times we have a good idea about what happened. And how do we deploy to prevent the next one from happening? So you're right, we definitely flood resources into an area after a shooting, and eventually, you're right, it's not set on 96 hours, but when we think it's calmed down, or when we get pulled to a different area, you're right, they're gonna leave. It's meant to do a lot of things. It shouldn't be to harass people, and certainly, I think that sometimes we make mistakes, and the last thing we want is to alienate or ostracize the good people that live in that community. That's who, at its most pure, basic sense, is who we're there to serve and protect.
Yeah.
Doesn't always go that good, but it's just, to me, you know, you could jump in. To the point about, I'd love examples if you had some, and I'll address particular ones. But I think there is a culture at times, you're right. There's no doubt there's a culture. But that's my job and executive's job in this agency, that, you know, somewhere here it probably says trust, or it used to say trust. If the public doesn't believe the cops are out there to protect them, we got more work to do. If the public doesn't believe that bad cops, and you know, I like to say, remind people, the good work cops do.
Right.
Right? And hopefully it's an extremely small percentage, but if people do bad things, they got to be held accountable. And that buck stops with me. And anyone, I would disagree a little bit about, you know, is there a culture? Yeah, there's a culture. There's a culture in every job.
In
There's a
every-
culture in lawyers, there's a culture in doctors, there's a culture in police and law enforcement. But most of the time when you open the paper and you read about some investigation that Internal Affairs did, you know where it started most of the time? By cops telling Internal Affairs, this is something going on. Because the last thing a cop wants to do is have somebody tarnish that shield too. So it's not perfect, but there's also a culture of doing the right thing. So Jeff, anything
Yeah,
you
no,
would add?
I really want to just touch on both of their points because, you know, they bring up valid points I think need to be addressed. You know, start with Jeremiah. You know, you talk about, you know, cops on the block flooded after a shooting and stuff.
Definitely happens.
I mean, there are people out there going to feel the cops out here to mess with and harass us. But at the same time, there are people on that block who say, Officer, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. There are people who live on that block who do not hang in the streets and deal on the streets. They go to work, they come home, they're older, and all they say is thank you. During all this time, throughout this whole summer, this whole year, when people were talking about defund the police and stuff, and I took over community affairs, and I started meeting people outside of Brooklyn North, up in the Bronx, Harlem, Queens, all over. The overwhelming theme was we want to see more cops. We want cops on our block. We want to be safe. We want the cops to be out there respectful, working with us and trusting us, and in a position where we can trust them. And I think that's really the key. When we come to a block after a shooting, and you know, we're there to try to prevent another shooting or retaliation, again, we're the police. We should be the ones sticking out our hands first, telling people why we're here, letting people know here's the detective's numbers if you have something you can help out with. That's how we're really supposed to be doing that. And we can do a better job at that. I admit that. As a precinct commander, I put people out on blocks afterwards. And I always told them, talk to people, you know, make sure we're out there, you know, stand outside of the cars to try and get some information. We can learn from it. Did I do the best job at teaching them? No, because sometimes you got to go out there and teach them how to do it. Let me show you how to walk up and down this block and shake hands and talk to people. So absolutely, and violence interrupters, you know, great hardworking people, and they're out there trying to do a community service and try and prevent violence in the community. So absolutely, that's what it's all about. I think we're getting better at it, learning how to use our resources, learning how to build partnerships, and I think that's what the boss here put me in this role for, to help build those relationships and make better use of those partnerships. But you know, you're absolutely right. They shouldn't be out there to harass people. And if you see that and you ever feel that way, I ask you to call me. You know, call me after the fact. Say, you know, Chief, they're out here and it's not right. We had a shooting. I'll be the first one to come out there and try to, you know, change that whole mindset. And then to just address what Brother Kenny said. You know, I won't use that word to address my folks. You know, but I understand what you're saying.
Yep.
Because to be quite honest, there are blocks where shootings occur. Certain parts of the city where there are blocks that shootings occur, Jeremiah, that you wouldn't walk through after the fact because you know the block is hot.
Yes.
And I'm not going down there. And I hear Christian giving me a yes from the background. We all know that.
I
We
disagree
all-
though. That's what I'm saying. It has people that can deal with these same problems differently.
Yeah, but
and
there
I'm
are
not saying
people-
that your tactics, you know, is wrong. What I'm saying is that it's outdated, and we
Right.
keep using this word resources. And by resources, we're just talking about 100 to 200 cops. We're not talking about actual resources like
So-
social workers
Right,
and
and-
trauma.
and-
We're not talking about real resources to
But
help
hold
the
on
world
now. You gotta listen to
change.
me, Jeremiah, because you jumped in. And we'll address resources in a second. Like I said, you may feel differently, all right, but that's you. There's hundreds of people who will not go on a block because they've been beefing down there, they've been shooting down there,
dangerous.
and I'm not going down that block. I don't feel safe.
My whole thing is that 100, the
So-
these same people wouldn't go on that block with child on that block.
But
That's my
You're
point.
right. You're
They
right.
wouldn't go on the block regardless, but if we put Bevo or SOS on that block, they will
right.
go down there.
And the same
Because they know
and,
these people can actually prevent.
and you're right about
The
this.
police, they don't bring an aura of prevent no more. Y'all bring an aura of solve.
There are people who wouldn't go down a block if they saw us on a block. Yeah,
No, I'm talking about that same block that you
Right.
had the shooting, that y'all deploy yourself on to make people feel safer. They wouldn't go down that block with y'all on it because people don't feel a sense of prevention from the police. We feel a sense of
like I
solving.
said, and I'm not saying people don't feel that, but there are a lot of people who
Yeah,
do
I
feel
think
that
there's
way.
both. I
But
think,
now-
I think there are a lot of people.
we
I
can
think
also
there-
measure like
I
these.
think there are a lot of people who
We can
do
measure
feel that
if
way.
y'all put
But
a 96
like I
hour
said-
shooting response if there's not another shooting within a week on these same blocks. Now these are also things that can
But
be measured.
if a shooting
So now is the
happens
tactic
again-
working? Is it effective?
If that shooting happens again on the same block,
Are y'all preventing
then
it?
that shows that there's a problem there that needs to be addressed.
There's also
And
a
it
problem
shows
within the
exactly
NYPD
why
internally
people
that
won't go to it.
that y'all really can't prevent. Which this is my point. Yeah, there's a problem on the block, but there's also a problem within the NYPD that y'all just put a 48 to 72 hour posted, but within a week there's a shooting.
Right.
This is why people
But I
they don't feel
agree
a sense
with,
of.
I don't agree with you on that because you're blaming it on the NYPD.
No, what I'm saying is that
When there's
we can
resources-
measure.
when there's
we can measure the
resources-
success.
When there's resources that's needed,
Yeah.
all right, better schools, better education and stuff. The police department, we could try and help and do things, and we do things working with kids and working with youth.
what,
But there's also, a component where
But now,
our leaders,
if
our
we're talking
elected
about
leaders,
the NYPD and what
you
y'all
know.
can do is
right.
that contract money that y'all giving to the white consulting firms can be given to black consulting firms and Bevo. So now we can say it's schooling, and that's a whole different problem that has something to do with the government. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about is the internal problem within the NYPD, which means there's no way that you can say you're there to stop something and within a week there's a shooting in Bevo, LH, Howard, and I can't remember the other projects in Brownsville. These are some of the worst projects in Brownsville. They went 100 days without no shootings. When we putting y'all on side
Wait a
blocks
minute.
for 96 hours and there's things going on within days. With y'all right there in the middle of y'all
Jeremiah.
shifting changes.
that's his old
Wait a minute.
beat right there.
I was the commanding officer of the 73rd precinct.
I know.
And I did 100 days with no shootings, with no cops or violence interrupts out
Okay,
there.
so you know what I'm
Right,
talking
but what
about.
I'm saying is, first of all, you could say it could be measured, but right now we're in the middle of the winter, we're in the middle of winter, we're in the middle of COVID, and we're in the middle of heavy
And that
snowstorms.
stopped nothing.
We have to look at the same 100 days when we get to the summer. So then if we're gonna really measure something in its effectiveness,
Yeah.
we gotta see exactly
But we're
the
not
other
talking about
factors.
Bevo. We're talking about what y'all been doing. This is not a new
Right,
tactic.
but
This is an
no,
old
but
tactic.
you just said,
And
I'm addressing what you just said, that there was 100 days because of Bevo, and I applaud Bevo, and I appreciate them. I don't want to see shootings anywhere. But I'm telling you, I was the CO of the 7-3 back in 2007 when shootings were even higher, and I went 100 days with no shootings in certain areas of the precinct. But we're talking about, right now, we're looking at the middle of the winter, in the middle of COVID, in the middle of a lot of snow. All right, so are we accurately measuring things? What happens when it's in the middle of the summer and we're looking at a totally different
cookouts.
demographics? So that's what I'm saying.
That's agreed, but what I'm
so
saying
we
is
have
that
to- so
you're
we
trying
have
say
to
that the
still
winter
look.
and COVID, that has not stopped nothing, because since COVID, the clearance number has been at 50%.
Yep.
The shootings and murders have been going up.
The-
We went through a whole year. We went through a whole year of COVID.
The shootings are always lower in the wintertime.
But that's not what I'm saying. It's still higher. It's still high, and you're
Still
higher than it
where?
has been.
It's
yeah,
not.
and the clearance is still going down. The clearance is not raising, which
Right,
means
but-
COVID is not playing a factor of people being in the house.
When you're talking
or
about,
nothing like that.
Jeremiah,
so-
when you're talking about clearances, what are you talking about? Closing shootings? What does that
Yeah,
mean to
closing
you?
shootings.
Why do you
murders.
think there's a problem?
Because, I mean, we live in these neighborhoods, so we see what's going on. If we want to talk about experience,
Yeah.
we see what's going on. And then I also know out of 68 murders and 67, only 24 were solved.
Why?
And now to me, that's a police problem. That's internal, that's something.
I'm picking up on something that you've said a couple
So
times.
if I
and-
got tactics and things like
But
that.
let me ask you something, because I picked up on this a couple times. You're talking about a block where something happens, 96 hours. How is it when Jeff puts police there?
Mm-hmm.
How effective is that? How effective is it when violence interrupters, right, go? You're making an argument that you're preventing the shootings. Police aren't preventing.
I'm making an argument that if we're gonna try to really, say what we're doing here is building a trust and try to end cycles of entanglement
Yeah.
within the NYPD and the community, we have to start allowing the community to also generate and determine what's
So how do
public
we-
safety.
Why,
Meaning,
aren't-
so if the
why
po-
aren't- what I was going to say to you is, why isn't it done together?
Yes.
Because this is not a culture influenced by the police,
how do we get
by
it
the
to be a
NYPD.
culture?
Meaning, right now, right, respectfully,
You're next.
if there's something going on, right, and meaning if the NYPD knows there's going to be a shooting, people on the block also know. Y'all just not finding out. Yeah, you get what I'm saying?
Well, you've been
Y'all
finding
got
out
it.
from the
people.
Yeah, y'all
You're
got
gonna
it
know
from.
first.
Yeah,
You're gonna
getting-
know first.
Y'all getting it
Okay.
from them. So which means, now let's really think about it. You think the people on the block is gonna really want something to happen or let anything happen?
No.
But then y'all show up. Y'all show up, okay, put the alcohol, let's stop the gambling, let's put the weed, cool.
You're right.
And then y'all leave, and then something still happens. When the police when the community themselves could have probably, generated their own public safety, when y'all pull up and then after y'all leave or after you're not there, even while y'all are there, there are shootings and murders
So-
still taking place.
But Jeremiah,
With people getting away.
here's my question to you. You're saying that the community could have generated their own public safety.
Do we allow them to?
But we're talking about, we can go back shooting after shooting after shooting where that wasn't the
But
case.
do we
where they
allow them to?
What do you
Or
mean? If the community comes out and say, hey, we're going to take a stand on our block, of
We
course
welcome
will.
that.
Of course
We
we
welcome
welcome that.
We-
We welcome that.
That's
If-
how
March is.
No,
was
that-
founded
I'm not talking about, I'm not saying it like that. What I'm saying is, right, these tactics and things like that don't give the community a chance to say, or the budget, the participatory budget, don't allow the community to say, I have the funds to say I'm going to generate my own public safety. So it's not only just does the community come out and say, it's also about the funds that's being reallocated that everybody's talking about defund the police, and the police say we put money into resources, but are these resources helping these same communities that's being disproportionately targeted?
You know what?
Now that's a real question.
All right, and I'm going to give you a real answer. The police department is a law enforcement agency. We're a law enforcement agency. We're also a service agency, and we're an order maintenance agency. Police and parades, making sure that things are like that. Law enforcement. Is there money that's allocated to do other community things? Yes, I get a budget of community affairs to go out there and do things and stuff. A lot of the things you're talking about and makes absolute sense. Yeah, absolutely. Put money into the community. Put money into CBOs. Put money into people that can go out there and do the safety. It still doesn't take. You can't. It has to be a balance where the NYPD can still go out there and do their work.
I'm
and work
not
with the
saying
community.
no, but I'm just saying we've never been there before, so you don't know. We
Right.
can't. This
But-
is something
but
that's
I think-
not happening or starting to
I think we're
happen.
heading in that direction. I think it is starting to happen because you just said Bevo's out there, and there's 100 days with no shooting in the area that they're
But
covering.
people don't got the budget or half the
So
numbers of the
that's a
NYPD.
whole nother conversation. I think we have to go. I think me and you have to go in front of city council and say, hey, the police department needs the help of the community.
I don't
and-
think that should be for city council. I think this conversation is about the community and the NYPD.
But if you talk
So I
about
think,
funding, where's the funding coming from?
now let's talk about. That big contract that
Okay, they
the
took a-
NYPD just
they-
gave to
and if-
Rudder and Finn could have been given to Bevo.
And if they took
To help do the same thing, to prepare our PC for the same conversation. It could have been them.
if $1 billion was removed from the police department,
I didn't say remove it. I said
Okay.
the same contract that we gave, the NYPD gave to Rudder and Finn to help prepare, the PC for the same conversation could have been reallocated and given to Bevo. And Bevo could help with the same thing and also started, doing exactly what
And
we're talking about. White consultant firm, we can't say we're giving money to white consultant firms to build trust and relationship between Black and Latinx
and
communities when these people don't come from our communities.
100%
They didn't grow up the way
disagree
we
with
grew
you. I understand
growing
what
up.
you're saying now. I understand what you're saying about that. But that's still, even with that, that's still a small portion of it.
That's small to
You're
the
talking about-
NYPD because that's a little bit of money
But
to y'all, but you put that
you-
into community, that's not small. That's a big step.
I think it's a step, but at the same time, you're talking about 5 boroughs that needs a vast amount of resources. the police department still needs its resources and it
Yeah.
still needs to get things done. This is what I'm talking about. It has to be a balance.
But there's not a lack of resource within the NYPD for you to even be saying the NYPD still needs.
I don't know all about
Yeah.
that. I won't
That's
say
what-
that.
okay.
But I
The
understand.
lack of
There is-
resources within these communities that we're talking about and the NYPD is not the same. There's a drastic difference, like a drastic difference.
Absolutely. The police
So now-
department is a city
And
agency.
the same
and
five,
it's
every
funded.
5 boroughs,
Absolutely.
we can literally think of a bevo for these 5 boroughs that we can reallocate $1.4 billion into 5 boroughs, and it. Now, to y'all, that may be a small step, but that's how you build. The community can now say, okay, you're leaving your public safety up to us.
But-
For real, we're not just
But
looking at
there
it.
was money allocated into our violence interrupters this summer, and the shootings were through the roof.
Bevo?
Brown, 7-3 had the second highest amount of shootings in the city. And that's
No, I'm
Bevo.
talking about money reallocated into Bevo.
They was reallocated to the to CMS. I don't know exactly how it was split. I'm not privy to that information, but it was this money was removed from the police department. It was supposed to go to CMS and other city resources, and our shootings went through the roof.
Now, can we measure that money getting there? Isn't like, can we measure how?
but-
We can't.
Jeremiah.
So we can't.
So,
it's-
and I
but these
understand
are
that,
real
but-
conversations,
Right,
though.
these are
It's a
real
real
conversations.
Can we
but-
say we know
But
this
I don't
money was
think this conversation
reallocated
is
to
going to be
help
solved
communities?
here.
We can't say that.
We can say that.
Okay.
We
You're
can.
right.
I mean, not to a specific dollar or this, here's $100 it went, but certainly the conversation is going on right now. I think it's a good conversation about reallocating money and making sure money is spent in communities. What Jeff said is true. I mean, there has been steady increase in funds, to my knowledge, that have been allocated to crisis management systems and violence interrupters throughout New York City. There are a lot of different groups. I don't know about any particular group, but I would come back to, and I do want to hear from you, so jump in, don't be shy.
We've been holding this out. Let Christian jump in.
Everything has to be balanced, because I could tell you that we had a bad year last year as a city,
definitely.
right? As a city. And we saw levels of shootings that basically doubled. But if you go back to the year before, and the year before, and the year before, they were the lowest shooting numbers in decades in New York City. So
But
people
I
like
agree with
Jeff,
the balance
people
with-
like Jeff kind of
with
know what
Chief
they're
Major.
doing also. I know you know what you're doing and trying to do the right thing. But the law enforcement people that have cut arrests and cut stops were too high. There's no doubt. But over the last 8 years or so, 6-8 years, we've been moving on a path, not done, but moving in the right direction. Neighborhood policing, working with kids. This is what we're trying to do. Cutting arrests. But still, listen, if you got a gun, we're going to try to identify and get you off the street. We don't want people with guns running around and hitting your mother, your sister, your aunt, your brother with a gun. Bullets don't care where they go. You know that. So we've been, that's the formula. The question is now, how do we get back to what worked, but do it not? You're saying we can do this better, or we can do this if we get more funds. We're not disagreeing with you. We also know how to do things, but if we do it together, it's going to be better. That's what we got to keep coming back to here. What do you think?
Okay, well, I agree with everything they were saying, but I believe
They weren't agreeing, though. You got to pick a side. Come on.
no, I believe that if the police work with the violence interrupters from the different organizations, Guns Down Life Up, SOS, all of those different RTG, Release the Grip, all of them, if we work together as a unit, because Guns Down Life Up, SOS, the community knows those organizations. So the community would receive them more with open arms than probably the police. So if Guns Down Life Up or SOS was to mobilize with the police, because we should partner with everyone and all the other Cure Violence organization, Life Camp and everyone like that, if the police works with them, I believe that there can be an equal balance between the community, the police, the Cure Violence organizations, and then when the community mobilizes as one, then that's how you get the guns off the streets and people will stop killings and things like that. But it can't be just individual. I don't think that the cure violence organizations could do it without the police. And I don't believe that the police can do it without the cure violence organizations. So when you have the equal funding between not just the police, but the cure violence, what are they called? Cure violence initiative, something like that with the mayor's
Crisis
office.
management system.
Yes, crisis management system. When you fund and you give each organization, not just the big ones, but each organization, so that we can get more violence interrupters. So then they can canvass the area in their catchment area and then work with their local police station at the same time, which then can help the community, help the NYPD solve their cases, get them a much quicker result so that cases are now open for 2 or 3 years and they have not been solved, and then some of them get passed over. People get kidnapped. They say you can't find the person that gets kidnapped until 48 hours later. But if we work with the community, then we could take that 48 hours to 24, and then that 24 split it in half into 12. And then that 12 you turn it into 6. So I believe that when you work as a unit, that things will be fine, and then give balance. That's what I believe.
I have a question though. My whole thing is, right, what is the unit? Because now, people, we associate the police with the NY part. Policing has nothing to do with the blue and white. So now we gotta look at the definition of policing and things like that. Why are we calling violence interrupters policing? They're police, they're upholding the law, they're preventing things. Policing is not only for the NYPD, policing is also for the old lady that sees something going on and stops it, for the people that jumps in front of them. That's also policing. Policing just doesn't have to do with the NYPD or the LAPD or a PD or a uniform. Policing, this was we see it in the community.
I would say everyone can get engaged in public safety. There's no doubt. Everyone can be a part of the solution, no doubt. A little more complicated, I think, when you talk about, first of all, there's laws. You have to be certified. There's rules, there's regulations, there's indemnification. We get sued, we're held to a standard. We have to train to certain standards. So there is a little bit of a difference. Everyone can be involved, but there's got to be systems in place that work. When somebody calls 911,
department has to be trained and certified. There's people that's out here that's trained and certified from experience.
But what
that does way better than somebody who done been through the police academy and went to school. That really means nothing when you're going into real communities. And I'm not saying it it means nothing, but I'm saying we have people that grow up in
the difference between those people and NYPD, if those people do something against the community, they're going to be held accountable.
No, that's what I'm saying. No, what I'm saying that we need to change that. We need to change this. Public safety needs to be put in the hand of not only NYPD, but into our hands, so that there's not repercussions and things like that when people actually start taking up hold against
you have situations, Brooklyn, Bronx, all these different areas, and just by names, Ramarley Grams, Akai Gurley,
Brooklyn.
Yeah, Brooklyn. I could right now it's a fuzz, but it's so many names of individuals who got murdered, and the officers they walked out the courtroom, and they got a desk job, or they transferred from the NYPD to the fire department. So it's just it's so many different things. So what you're saying, you're correct, but I kind of disagree because there's a certain standard of sovereignty that our people cannot move in, and it's different.
So are you saying we're incapable of it? Is what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying we're not incapable. I'm saying that there's a certain place and sovereignty that we do not operate in.
Yeah. No, that we do not accept because it has never been brought to us or showed or open to us. Meaning we have never really taken the authority to say, I respect this person, to say if something is going on, I can respect him, to get in the middle of it, because we only look at the police as the authority. And this I'm saying, that also needs to shift within us, but that's something that comes within the police.
Right, Jeremiah, I disagree. When we talk about public safety in communities, I can take you in blocks in Brooklyn, Queens, and I'm sure they exist in Manhattan or Bronx, where there's never any trouble on that block. And it's not because the police are there, it's because the people in that block do not allow it to happen. You know you can't go on that block and do things wrong, because the people say, you don't come on this block, we're going to deal with that, we're going to call the police, we're going to address it. So public safety has always started in communities, with communities first. All right, but now there are blocks that we lose. There are blocks that we lose. There are blocks where the young folks take over, older folks take over, whatever.
Those are
At
blocks
that
we
point-
talking about. I mean, obviously, I'm talking about those
but it all falls into the whole package when you talk about public safety, because there are those blocks that exist. There are those stores that kids could never go into and start trouble because the people in there just didn't have it. They said, "Yo, you know this is our place. You come in here, there is going to be a problem." And people say we don't mess around in that place. So that's always been public safety like that. From the time I was growing up to the time I ran commands, I knew those blocks in Brownsville, East New York, where I never had trouble at because the people on the block
want to
took
jump
care of
in.
it.
5-minute warning. So you got one last. You got to bring it home with what you want to say. 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm just saying. So there is already a component of that public safety. The blocks where we have the trouble, we need a strategy where we are getting the violence interrupters and we are getting the police. And I worked with the violence interrupters before people knew what violence interrupters were. But there was only like 2 or 3 groups out there. In Brooklyn, it was like SOS, and I was working with AT and Man Up. And we had a great relationship, and I appreciate everything they did for us, and I valued what they did for us. And I think the department is coming around. I don't think we're fully there yet, but the department is coming around, and we're understanding that help is key. So you're absolutely right. We have to put it together. We have to give the violence interrupters their room to operate. But they also, everyone has to understand, too, that the police ultimately have to answer for, the crime in the city. We're accountable for the crime in the city. And sometimes the violence interrupters are going to need help just as well as we need help. And we got to be prepared to work together and move in. All right, 5-minute warning, so I'll let these 2 youngsters go.
Christian, what do you got?
Okay.
Any last thoughts?
I'm sorry, yes.
Any last
okay.
thoughts?
Well, Guns Down Life Up, we're based at Lincoln Hospital, and I have seen our director, James.
Under 49th Street.
Yes, in the Bronx. And I have seen James and Maria sometimes be very exhausted because people are coming in left and right. They're getting beeped every day. But we have seen some changes. We have the programs and the community-based programs with the youth that give the youth an opportunity to stop whatever they're doing on their idle time. They're not outside in the street, and they're not doing those things. They're having fun, but also learning life skills so that they're able to have these interactions with the police. There are some people that have bad encounters with the police, but they're able to reconcile those things and come together.
Are the police currently involved in that?
With Guns Down Life Up?
Yeah.
Yes and no. We do have the 4-1, I think that's on right there, the Hunts Point area, that are always calling us when they have events. But I mean, the other ones, not as much as the 4-1. So I would say that there is just a little bit more where the police, if the police get involved with us, I believe that there would be a much better area because, the projects are right across the street. I believe that is Patterson, and those projects are not very good. And like he said, my community on Fulton Avenue, we're very quiet. We look out for each other. If anything ever happens, if somebody breaks your window, the person is going to know because somebody on the street is going to know what's going on, and they won't just let it happen. So the people that broke your window, there was somebody there that said this person did it. They were able to pinpoint them and help the police. So I believe that when things like that happens, that it's a better way to assist not just your community, but also the police, and it helps everybody bring together as one.
Kenny, last words from you?
Just like to say, this overall experience, we covered, it's just like having a seesaw of a conversation, right? And it was just like a seesaw plus the zigzag, right? Because we went all over the place in a sense. And the true thing is trust and cycles of entanglement, right? And me, with Faith, Fathers Alive in the Hood, these groups right here, this is something I'm used to because we sit here and I work with youth from the ages 11 to our ages. You know what I mean? And it's multi-generation where we could be able to sharpen one another and be able to just have these conversations which are fruitful. And at the same time, exhibit what unity is. And unity, it comes with the word community, right? Communicating in unity. So when we say community, all right, we have to communicate in unity, which means we have to come to an understanding. And as long as we have this understanding, we'll put ourselves in a place of the first word, the trust, right? Because it has to, the most important word in trust is the U.S., right? Just not United States, but U.S., it's us. So if we can sit here and we can have these conversations with one another, which is great, and even advocate for different organizations and things of that nature, individuals who are getting funded and getting allocations, that's great. when I think of the word like this community, and I look at, you know, what's going on in the state of all of our communities, it is something that is sad, and it's something that has to be, really looked upon, and we have to continue to not just have these conversations, but, you know, continue to go out and not tarnish the things that has been, you know, so delicately worked on. With Chief, he went out in his serving days. He put a lot of a lot of groundwork in. You got a lot of respect, right? And that same respect can be easily tarnished by another officer who might be new on a force.
Very true.
That could just come into the same area what you were policing back in your time, and the same thing with you, same in your time, and they'll come and they'll just violate. And when they violate, it's like now that then you hear these conversations where it's F the police and all this other stuff that comes up, right? But we have to understand that respect has to maintain in our community.
It's gotta
like
be
we
built
have to
slow.
be able to, and in order to trust one another, we have to have that borderline where we respect one another. And that doesn't matter the rank. And so if you're working in NYPD and you're a janitor and you're inside the precinct and you're cleaning and fixing stuff up, the officers that come in, they should give that janitor the same respect that they would give to the chief.
Amen.
Absolutely.
So it's just like, and that's the same thing when they come into the communities. It has to be a situation where we trust one another, right?
Yeah.
But in order to have trust, we have to respect, and we have to be able to build these things over time. And with time, the wound starts to heal. And then hopefully, right, along when that spider do come along, there's no longer a fresh wound. But if it just so happened to become another wound, it'll have a new healing process.
I got to wrap it up, but you started and you ended perfectly. And I want to thank Jeremiah. I want to thank Christian, Kenny, yourself, Jeff. We covered a lot of ground today.
Sir.
Takeaway, you know, you said it. It starts with respect. It starts with trust. And you don't get it. You got to earn it.
Gotta earn it.
And it's slow. And you can lose it. And conversations like this, I didn't agree with everything you said. You probably didn't agree with everything I said or him or vice versa, but appreciating each other's opinion. And it may not be right, it may not be wrong, but it's your opinion, and I respect it. And listening and having these conversations, and I just want to thank each and every one of you. All right? Thank you all, and we'll be back. Thank you. Kenny, thank you. She's getting the hook. She's like, we gotta go, we gotta go. Thank you, brother.
Well, sir.
Jeff?
Whatever, however
Yeah,
you give it, man. It is what it is.
Thank you. I told your other half out there, I'm gonna take a ride up there. All right, so I don't know if you'll be there, but I'll see you up in Lincoln Hospital.
Okay, thank
All right? Within the next week or two.
you. You're welcome.
I know you got a room.
Yeah.